Welcome. We're excited to have you here with us for Southwestern University's Virtual Admitted Student Week. We are going to start off talking about fine arts at Southwestern. Our next panel will be current parents of current students and also alums. After that panel, then we will have some more current students available to talk with you. I'm going to turn it over now to Bob from our office, and he's going to introduce himself, and we'll keep talking about fine arts. Take it away, Bob.
All right, thanks, Laura. So welcome everyone. We're excited that you are joining us today for the Thursday edition of Admitted Student Week. As Laura mentioned, my name is Bob Baldwin, and I am the Director of Enrollment Operations here at Southwestern. And I'm excited to welcome all of you to this next session, which is really near and dear to my heart. In addition to serving as our Director of Operations, I'm also the Office of Admissions Liaison with the Seraphim School of Fine Arts. And so I'm really eager to moderate this next discussion, which highlights some of Southwestern's fine arts programs. If you've been to an on-campus audition or portfolio review before, you probably recognize my face, and I saw some of you have already signed up to join us, so I'm really excited that you're here. If you've joined us before, you know that we have a Q&A function, which is right below you on your screen, so feel free to ask questions at any time, and we will try to get to them on air. So we'd like to take a few moments to introduce our panelists joining us here today. And we'll start off by introducing Dr. Kimberly Smith, who is the chair of our art history department.
Hi, everyone. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me to be part of this, Laura and Bob. So I am representing art history from the fine arts. Our department is actually both studio art and art history. We're divided into two components, and I'm representing the art history part of the department. I'm going to say something really quickly about what I do as a researcher, but I'm mostly interested in talking about our courses and teaching, although I'd be happy to take questions on anything you want. My most recent research, I just finished writing an essay on an Austrian artist, an expressionist artist named Egon Schiele. And I just finished an essay on his landscape paintings that he did towards the end of World War I. And it turns out he had this interesting relationship with this influential cultural geographer and curator. So I argue that when the landscapes were exhibited in Sweden and Holland in 1917, that they functioned as wartime propaganda for Austria. So that's something I've been working on lately. At Southwestern, though, my classes cover a whole lot more than early 20th century Austria, which is good. I teach both the introduction to art history, but also a range of modern courses running from the early 19th century to the current moment in Europe and the United States. All of these courses also contribute to the International Studies program. So if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to try to answer those too. And I also teach feminism and art history, which contributes to the Feminist Studies program. I'd like to tell you a little bit about our major and our program. We have 4 art history faculty. And we are deliberately global in scope, which is actually pretty unique to a program that size. We've been very careful to structure a program that offers courses from around the world. So we teach the history of art and architecture, from ancient to contemporary, from around the world, but we focus especially on East Asia, Europe, Latin America, and the United States. Art history is a fascinating discipline. I think so, of course, and I hope I can persuade you it is too. We analyze individual works of art, not just by thinking about the artists who made them, although they matter a lot, but the historical and social issues of the place and time in which the works were made. So that means that in all of our courses and in our research, and what we ask students to do as well, is to talk about style and media, but we're always making connections to a whole range of issues: history, music, theater, politics, science, economics, gender, race, class, philosophy, nature, the environment, and more. So that makes it a great discipline for not only fostering visual and cultural literacy, but also making rich connections with a range of disciplines across campus. I could say more about why I love teaching Southwestern students, but I don't want to take up too much time, so I'll stop there.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Smith. So next we're going to introduce our next panelist, who is Dr. David Asbury, Chair of our Music Department.
Hello and welcome, and likewise, Laura, Bob, thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here today. And I will also tell you just a little bit about our department and maybe a bit about my own research interests. I see that Bob has a harp behind him, and one of my strong interests has been in the study of Irish music. And in fact, so I'm a guitarist first and foremost, and something that I've been interested in recently has been associated with Irish Baroque music, and particularly a composer named Turlough O'Carolan, and I made 33 arrangements of the 220 extant pieces of his for guitar. One of the beautiful things about arranging Carolan's music is that the music itself was passed down in history only as a single melodic line, because like others in his era and time and place, Carolan was a blind itinerant harpist. It was something that sometimes happened to folks in the British Isles in that era. That you were blinded as a young person, you were sort of stewarded towards music as a career. So he didn't write the music down. Scribes wrote the music down, and the music that was passed down, having just a single melodic layer, means that as an arranger, I get to also be a tiny bit a composer at the same time, because clearly the harp has many strings and he would have harmonized his music. So it's been a great joy for me to study this music and to make my arrangements of the music of Turlough O'Carolan, amongst other things. I'm also interested in music and activism, and like Dr. Smith was talking about with art history, music has great connection to so many other disciplines. And actually during the current pandemic, we're seeing such an outpouring of musical activism. And that's been something that I have had also a strong interest in, and especially asking composers to write music on environmental themes. To date, my colleague and I, Bruce Kane, have had about 35 pieces written for us on environmental themes, and we are trying to engage as activists in that way. Onto our department. Our department, we have 7 full-time faculty, around 30 adjunct faculty. We offer instrumental lessons on every orchestral instrument, the strings, piano, voice. We have a wonderful vocal student who will be speaking with you a little bit later, Grace Sexton, who can talk to you a little bit more about studying voice at Southwestern. But I think I've gone on long enough as well, and we want to get to your questions. So if you have anything that you want to ask me about anything that I've just said, I'm happy to add more, but I'll turn it back over to Bob at this point, I think.
All right, thanks so much, Dr. Asbury. So as he mentioned, next we're fortunate to have a current Southwestern student online with us, Grace Sexton, who is, I understand, studying not just voice, but also business at Southwestern. So Grace, go ahead.
Hi, so like Bob said, I'm a music and business double major at Southwestern. I'm going to be a junior in the fall. So if you have any questions about voice stuff, I can help you with that, or just double majoring in general, I can try to answer some questions. I also work on campus in the Fine Arts building, so if you have questions about on-campus work or just fine arts in general. Can you hear me? So yeah, if you have questions about double majoring or working on campus or anything like that, I'm here to help, or questions just about student life in general, I can totally try to answer those for you.
All right, great. Thanks so much, Grace. And so opening it up for questions. So again, just type in your questions in the Q&A box below you, and then we will try to get to those. So to kick things off, while we give our attendees time to type out their questions, Dr. Asbury, I guess my first question would be for you. We get a lot of students who, prospective students who approach us and say, you know what, I've played the cello for 10 years or the flute for 8 years, and my academic interests are leading me elsewhere, but I still want to participate in music. What opportunities are there in the music department for non-majors specifically?
There are many. So all of our classes in the music department, and this is mostly true, I think, throughout the whole campus, but they're all open to non-majors. And in fact, our ensembles are populated, all of our ensembles, the orchestra, the wind ensemble, the jazz band, our choirs, our smaller ensembles are populated with as many non-majors, and in many cases with even more non-majors than majors. And we see this as just a wonderful synergy, that it's great for folks who are interested in having a deep and intense musical experience to be sitting right alongside someone who is pursuing it at that level of intensity as a major. But likewise, we also understand that there's this enrichment that happens for music majors when they're having the chance to interact and create with people who are studying outside of the discipline. So, and many of the non-majors who perform in our groups certainly could pursue a major if they chose to. So it doesn't mean that there's kind of a talent drop off in that sense. And one of the things that I should also point out about Southwestern that I think is unique, certainly comparing Southwestern to especially larger institutions, but any student can take a private lesson as a class at any time throughout their career. And years ago, you can tell by my gray beard, I was a teaching assistant at the University of Texas, and there was a lottery. If you wanted to take a guitar lesson at the University of Texas, you signed up for a lottery. And you would get into class, be one of 20 people in a class, and you got to do it one time during a 4-year career. And the lottery typically would have more than 100 people signing up for it, and so there's a good chance you weren't going to get it. We are focused on the undergraduate experience, and so as non-majors, you can fully pursue the music studies that are of interest to you to almost any extent that you would like.
Great, thank you so much. So we did get a question from one of our attendees. I guess this would be directed at Grace. How is it double majoring in fields that are on the surface seemingly very different? You know, of course, at Southwestern, we like to have those paideia moments where we, connect different disciplines. So what has your experience been in double majoring in different areas?
It's been surprisingly very easy. When I was a senior in high school, I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just knew that I kind of wanted to keep music in my life, but I didn't want to be a performer. So I just started trying different things, and luckily the music department and the business department have a really great relationship. Dr. Asbury is actually my advisor. So all of our on-campus advisors have great connections with each other and with the different departments. So I think any of your advisors or mentors could answer questions that you have about double majoring. They can make that happen for you. Our curriculum just makes it very possible to do that. I have so many friends that are double majors. It's insanely normal. And I think if that's something that you want to do, that Southwestern's a really great place to do it.
Thanks so much for that perspective. And so I guess my next question for Dr. Smith, so art history is a field that unfortunately a lot of students don't get to explore during high school. And so a lot of times they arrive to college or university not necessarily understanding what it is or how it works. So maybe you can talk a little bit about what goes on in the classroom in art history, in the art history department, and who would be a good fit for someone who is looking at art history.
Sure. Yeah, that's a great question. Most high schools, right, don't have art history, but some do. I mean, and there are definitely some students who take an AP art history. But I would say the vast majority of the students who come through our classes, it's their first art history experience. And it's actually how we get a lot of our majors, students who didn't realize they were going to fall in love with it and found their way into the classroom because of a requirement or because they heard good things about it. So we are a discipline that studies individual works of art, and that can be anything from paintings to buildings to ceramics to jades in ancient East Asian art to photography, and there's a whole range of visual media. And our goal is to understand what those works of art mean or how they create meaning. And they create meaning through their forms, what they look like visually. And then we tie that visual form to, as I mentioned a second ago, to what the artist was hoping to communicate, but just as importantly, to the specificity of the time and place in which the work was created, which means, you know, take any year and any place. Like if I teach something on 1810 in France, then in our class, in order to understand a work of art that was made in 1810 in France, we're going to have to learn a whole lot of stuff about religion and politics and economics and class and colonialism and industrialization at that moment to figure out what the work means. So there's a lot of history in art history. And we actually get some students who kind of migrate from history to art history because it's a different way of doing history. It's it's object-based. And I often think of it as like a portal, like through that object, through that artwork, is a door into a culture, and you learn so much about that culture by walking through that door. In order to do that kind of learning, we do focus a lot on describing style and form and cultivating what I like to call visual literacy, which I think is essential. If you think about the world in which we live, I mean, look at what we're doing right now. We live in a world of images. Real images, virtual images, and I think that part of being an educated citizen is knowing how to engage with those images thoughtfully. So visual literacy is one of our priorities. We spend a lot of time reading and then discussing what we read. So finding ways to enter a text analytically, to organize its structure, to think about how arguments are made and the way language is used. We have lots of discussions in class. Nobody just stands up and lectures. We have a lot of give and take. And writing is also a big component of what we do. From short, quick essays to longer research papers and everything in between. Writing is an enormous part of what it means to be in an art history class. And I was just looking lately at the survey that they do of employers, and they said that the number one thing that they were looking for from undergraduates was an ability to write well. So I think the writing that is an emphasis across campus at Southwestern is a big part of what we do and important for student success.
That's great background to have. Thank you so much. So we've gotten a bunch of different questions from our attendees. And so I guess I would direct this at either Dr. Asbury or Grace. It's just about the time commitment that it takes to be part of an ensemble, how large the different ensembles are, what different ensembles are there. I think a lot of times students arrive at Southwestern with varied musical backgrounds. Some high schools may have more of a competition component as opposed to other types of formats. So maybe the two of you can kind of tag team and shed some light on what the ensembles are like at Southwestern.
Sure, why don't I start, and then Grace can kind of follow along and tell you with some greater specificity about what it's like to perform in chorale. So I mentioned earlier the ensembles. We have 2 choirs. So Grace sings in chorale. The time commitment for chorale is a little steeper than for Southwestern Singers. The Southwestern Singers is our second group. They meet at different times. Southwestern Singers meets on Wednesdays and Fridays for 90 minutes. And chorale meets Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday for an hour. And they focus on slightly different repertoire, but they're both really great choirs. We have students who are on scholarship to actually sing in both choirs. So the chorale is technically an audition choir. Southwestern Singers, anyone can sign up for it. So there's a distinction there. Sorry, my computer just made a funny noise. I don't know if that was broadcast. As far as the instrumental ensembles, there's a wind ensemble. Wind ensemble has approximately 40 to 50 players in it. And the orchestra, Bob is a member of the orchestra, so he can kind of chime in and talk a little bit about that. He's a very fine viola player and one of our ringers in that group. There's a jazz band that has around 25 players in it. We have an Andean ensemble, a percussion ensemble, a guitar ensemble, what's called a new music ensemble, which is playing primarily works that have been written within the last 20 years and many within the last 1 or 2 years. The time commitments are that the expectation is that you're going to show up and be prepared to play in that orchestra or choir or what have you. But the directors work hard to make the time commitments not stretch too far beyond what's required already in the kind of rehearsal environment. So if some students will need to prepare a little extra to fully participate in rehearsals, others maybe a little bit less. But there's not a huge time commitment outside of that. There is no competition. We don't have a marching band. We don't do any of that stuff. We're all about the music. And I think I'll let Grace chime in. And Bob, you should add your perspective too.
Yeah, so like he said, I'm a member of chorale, which is really fun. And you don't have to be a major to be in chorale. While it is auditioned, I can think of like 6 names off the top of my head that are bio majors or English majors or poli-sci majors. But in chorale, we mostly focus on more like fancy, classy music. So like we did Beethoven, we've been doing Bernstein, things like that, where SU Singers typically does like musical theater and more fun stuff, but we do get to sing together sometimes. So they were going to sing this spring, actually, they were going to sing Beethoven with us, which was going to be really awesome, but things happened. And we mentioned the question of competition and stuff. One of the reasons I really like the fine arts program at Southwestern is because that's not really the case. In other choirs that I've been in, or in other programs that I've been in, there's been like a competitive attitude, and you're always thinking about, do I sound better than the person next to me? Are they worried about how I sound? And that's totally not the case. We all love each other. There's like a little circle of couches in the Fine Arts building that we just hang out at all day long. But yeah, I think that speaks to the closeness that we all have and the closeness that we all create from making music with each other, which is kind of special.
Awesome. Well, yeah, so I'm the moderator, but I guess I'm in sort of a unique role here that I'm a participant as well. So I'm happy to provide a little bit of perspective. So as Dr. Asbury mentioned, I do play the viola in the orchestra. It's a little bit of a different perspective since I'm not a student, but the orchestra has, trying to think off the top of my head, I want to say maybe 20 to 25 students in it. It is, we play a variety of different repertoires. Sometimes we collaborate with other groups. As Grace mentioned, we were going to do Beethoven's Choral Fantasy, so that was kind of sad that we didn't get to do it, but we've done Fauré's Requiem with the chorale and SU singers, so it's really is a wonderful group. And there was a question about how often the groups have concerts and performances. So I'll let some other folks answer this as well. But from the orchestra standpoint, we typically have 2 concerts, big concerts per year, one in the fall and one in the spring.
The other ensembles pretty much do the same thing. There may be additional smaller type performances that might happen, but usually there's one kind of larger formal concert that happens during the each semester for the chorale, and likewise for SU singers. Sometimes those things are combined, other times they're separate, and so most of the ensembles work that way. And then additionally, there might be, for instance, last year chorale traveled to, well, I'll let Grace say what you all did on the in the Houston area, right?
Yes. So last year we traveled for the first time in like 20 years or something crazy like that. And we went to 2 high schools in Houston and performed some of the pieces that we were working on in the fall as like a recruitment kind of deal. We actually have at least one person confirmed attending Southwestern from those schools, which is really exciting. Because singers are more transportable than orchestras and bands, we do get asked to do like extra smaller things. So we sing the national anthem at the homecoming game. We do different services at our chapel during like Christmas time, graduation, all that kind of stuff. But it's not overwhelming enough that it's gonna take a huge part of your time, and it's not a like insane commitment. It's just the right amount, I think.
And I think I've heard that for the past few years or so that we've had students go to Paris and Italy as well, if I'm not mistaken, traveling for the music department. One question that we've gotten a couple times is about balancing fine arts with specifically music with other things such as athletics. And so Grace, do you know of any varsity athletes who are in chorale, or just sort of what is that balance like, I guess, for a student? If you can't speak to it personally, maybe talk about some of your friends or other participants in the ensemble.
Yeah, of course. So I'm not an athlete myself, so I can't speak from my own experience, but music education is one of the more time-consuming music degrees. And I have a friend who's a music ed major and he's on the swim team. So he is busy, but it's definitely possible. The coaches work really well with our directors and professors. So it's definitely possible. I have some friends that are on the soccer team that do it. They're on the golf team. There's athletes everywhere.
Awesome, thanks, Grace. So returning to art history, I guess the question would be, what are a lot of people would think, okay, art history, what can I do with that? Do people always tend to go to a certain area, or I guess what are some different career paths that some of our most recent art history grads have gone into?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think there's actually a misunderstanding among a lot of people that art history only leads to art-related careers. It can, and definitely our goal is to prepare our students well if they do want to go into an art-related field. And so that could be going into academia. And we actually just had a student, I just got an email yesterday, she just earned her PhD and is got a new professorship in England. So that's of course a path, but it's not a common path. That's pretty unusual. We have quite a few students who go into museum work, different forms of museum work. The type of museum work that I think a lot of people are familiar with is curatorial work, where you organize exhibitions, but museums actually have lots of different departments in them: education and fundraising, outreach. So we actually have alumni in all those different kinds of departments in museums around the country. We have students who are doing gallery work, working for auction houses. But those are all art-related fields. Those are great, and we prepare our students well for that. But actually, we make a point of communicating to our students that they can go on and do pretty much anything with an art history major. It's a liberal arts major, which means, as I mentioned before, I mean, we cultivate writing and reading and communication and analytical skills, and those are transportable. You can use those skills in a range of fields. So we have alums who are doing health sciences work. We have alums who are in the insurance industry. We have quite a few who have gone on to law school. We have a student who actually went on to get a philosophy degree, not an art history degree. So our students are actually well prepared to adapt to many professions. And I would include medical school in that as well. Actually, med schools have started to look specifically at art history students because art history students bring visual diagnostic skills that are actually really useful in the medical profession. So an art history degree doesn't close any doors, it only opens them.
Great. Wonderful. So another question has been that while music is its own department, there are a lot of different, I guess, sort of tracks that people can get into apart from performance. So Dr. Asbury, maybe you can talk about music education and composition and those kinds of opportunities.
Sure, and I would kind of like to just first maybe piggyback on what Dr. Smith was saying. I think, you know, it's true really of all of our degrees is that, you know, I think sometimes the arts are a little bit singled out, and from my perspective, unfairly so. It's not such a common question for people to go and ask, well, you know, what are you going to do with a computer science degree? Well, it might be very well that somebody does a computer science degree and also goes off to law school or pursues a graduate program in some other discipline. So I think Southwestern really does work to prepare students to engage in our modern world. Specifically about the different music programs, there's degree programs. We offer a Bachelor of Arts degree in music. So Grace is pursuing that degree because she's doing a double major. And there are slightly fewer classes, credits required within that degree, which allows for pursuing a second major a little bit more easily. But we also offer then several degrees that are more of a pre-professional variety. That you mentioned the music education degree, and Grace also touched on it earlier. It is one of the most packed degrees that we have on campus. We have a long history of offering this degree, and we have 100% job placement rate with this pre-professional degree for those who have decided that they wanted to pursue it as a career. So it's a very successful degree program. One of the reasons that it's so packed is that there are a lot of state regulations that require certain courses and skills that are developed before you become certified as a public school teacher in the state of Texas. We've also had, we created a degree because there were some students who felt like they wanted to pursue an education degree, a music education degree, but not certify as they're doing it so that they could study more outside of that degree plan and then certify after. So we offer a non-certifying degree. And typically students, there are a couple who are pursuing that degree right now who are planning on certifying either while they're pursuing a master's degree or actually while they're working. There are many situations that have arisen where someone gets hired and lacks the certification, but they've taken enough of the education courses to successfully win a job application, and so then certify actually while they're working. So 2 tracks in the music education degree, and then within those tracks we offer an instrumental track as well as a vocal track. Music composition, performance, and music literature are 3 other paths that students might take within a Bachelor of Music degree. So, and here's the thing that I think everybody should remember if you're thinking about this, it's, there's a lot of information there, and it's there, one of those things where once you have started down that path, you will need to know more about it as you start to try to think about which path you might choose. But the good news is that all of our degrees, the first year looks exactly the same. And so you've got some time to figure all of that out, to talk with students, to talk with the faculty, think about your own aspirations, and it's not a decision that you have to make right out of the gate. So there's plenty of time to figure all of those things out.
Awesome. So the next question, I guess, is for all three of the panelists. One of the things that we often talk about in the admission office as we're working with students is the idea of high impact learning experiences. So these would be things like internships and study abroad and student faculty research, things that get students outside of the classroom and start to make those connections to the outside world. And so from the perspectives that that you have, maybe you could talk a little bit about some stories or examples of those types of high impact learning experiences that students typically have or have recently had in your areas. Who wants to start? We'll start with Dr. Smith.
Okay, I'll start. Many of our students study abroad. Yeah, I mean, that's been a big part of what we recommend, although we don't require it. For a long time, we think that study abroad can be a critically formative experience. It develops your language skills, but it also gives you insight into another culture. But what it also does is give you insight into our culture. What you realize when you go abroad is that you see your own home in new ways as well. So it's a pretty transformational experience, and we've had many of our majors study in Latin America, in China, in different countries in Europe, and on the London program with Southwestern. We also have quite a few students who do high impact internships, and they usually choose to do it for academic credit. So you can do an academic internship where, in addition to the work on site, you have an academic component and a faculty supervisor. So I actually usually have at least one or two of those that I'm supervising each semester. Right now I have a student who, well, she's doing it remotely now, but she was working at a local history museum, the Williamson Museum, and she was in charge of organizing some presentations and dioramas. And for her research project now, because of everything that's happened, she is writing a paper on how both small and large museums are handling the pandemic, and how they've taken a lot of their experiences online and are trying to figure out how to do that. So she's conducting interviews with that museum director and doing research to figure out like how the museum world has been adapting to the moment that we're in. We've also had students intern in Austin at places like Flatbed Press, which is a print gallery in Austin, but also in other places in Texas. We actually have an internship at the Museum of Fine Arts in Houston that for the last few years has been held for a Southwestern student. It's competitive, and so we've placed a student each year who's gotten to work with curatorial staff at the MFAH, which has been pretty exciting for them as well. And we have some others too.
I'll go ahead and go next. I actually, pre-pandemic, had plans to intern at at a theater in Fort Worth because I'm particularly interested in arts administration. So I had an internship position set to work in the development department. But I mean, things happen. But I know people that have gone and done study abroad internship programs with our New York Arts program. I have a friend that was an intern for South by Southwest in Austin. So those are just a few specifically in music and music business kind of realms. I don't know if Dr. Asbury, you have any other examples on that?
Sure, we might as well throw Saturday Night Live out there as well. We've had a couple of students who have done internships with Saturday Night Live. Of course, that's kind of an eye-popping name. So I think both Dr. Smith and Grace have talked a bit about study abroad and the internships. The other thing that I would like to say about music is that through the high impact experiences funding that's available on our campus, students can also pursue additional study situations. And in music, there aren't going to be any this summer, but in a typical summer, there are music festivals across the country. And we've had students who have participated in music festivals from literally coast to coast. And those can be very rich experiences that I think it's a wonderful thing that we've kind of decided that it's important for us to support students in pursuing those kinds of activities, because when you're in the midst of studying during a semester and you've got 4 different classes and X number of things to take care of, the experience feels different than when you go somewhere, even if it's only for 2 or 3 weeks, but you're completely immersed in doing just that one thing and surrounded by like-minded people. So we understand the importance of that, and we're committed to helping students to have those types of high impact experiences as well.
Wonderful. Well, and we know our students who are very talented, who are looking at us, they're often looking at a lot of other institutions. And we've touched on this in various ways, but maybe to kind of hit it a little bit more directly, what makes Southwestern's programs distinctive? For example, if a student is looking more at a conservatory type of program, how does Southwestern's program stand out from that? And you can answer that question broadly. I guess this is directed at everyone, but we'll start with Dr. Asbury.
So being the product of a conservatory type of institution, I have I think a pretty, clear view of what that experience is like and how it's different from Southwestern. And I have to say, something that quite a famous guitarist said to me years ago, as I was finishing up my undergraduate degree, he said, you're like a well-oiled machine, but the problem is you have nothing to say, which was kind of a hurtful thing, but upon further reflection, I realized he was right. So I think the narrowness of that experience, at least for me personally, was something that did not serve me as well as I might have liked. And so when I joined the faculty here, I had to do a lot of kind of catching up on my own to be someone who was more broadly and kind of educated in important ways. So, that's not to knock that model. For some people, that's the right model. I think for many, it's not the right model. The world that we live in now, we are so interconnected that we are going to be constantly crossing boundaries more than ever before. And so having that breadth in the study and being able to kind of see things with a global perspective and a historical perspective, and the other, making connections to the other disciplines is hugely important. So I would like to say that. And I would also like to say that at Southwestern, the students here are our main focus, comparing us to maybe some larger institutions where there might be graduate students who are getting to sing the main roles with the opera or to getting to play the solos with the orchestra. That's not the experience here. We only have undergraduates. Our focus is you. All of our faculty are focused on you. We think about you all the time. For some people that might feel a bit suffocating. If you're one of those, then maybe Southwestern's not right. If you don't show up to class 2 or 3 times, guess what? Somebody's going to come find you. You will not disappear. So that's maybe not for everybody, but we see it as a strength, and we recognize that you have to love Southwestern as much as we love you. So in full disclosure, those are strengths, but they're also, things that are distinctly different than other places. And I'll let other folks talk.
Yeah, so a friend of mine actually went to Texas State her freshman year, and she transferred to Southwestern this year because she said that at a bigger school like that, she felt just kind of like a number, and that she was competing with grad students and wasn't making connections with people the way that she would here. And she's happier than she's ever been. Like she's constantly talking about how grateful she is that she switched. So for somebody like her, Southwestern was the right choice.
I don't know how much I can add to the great things you've already said. I think exactly. I mean, we're student focused. We have only undergraduates, which means all of our time and all of our attention and all of our creativity is focused on making sure our undergraduates have the best possible experience. You won't disappear. You won't be invisible. We know all our students by name. Our classes are not big. And every single faculty here chose this kind of experience for a reason, because we want to be teaching in that kind of environment. So just like Dr. Asbury said, students want to be in that kind of environment, like Grace, we want to be teaching in that kind of environment. And I think I just want to kind of riff off something that Dr. Asbury said as well, which is, yeah, I mean, the world is global. We are crossing boundaries and making connections more than ever. This Paideia program that we have is born of that kind of fundamental liberal arts idea that the big questions and the major issues can't be understood from one angle only. So yes, you will have a major and you'll have depth in that major, but we're a liberal arts school, which means that you're going to be able to bring your perspective on issues and problems that matter now from all different kinds of fields and disciplines, each of which frames the questions and the way to answer those questions in slightly different ways. But when you synthesize them and when you put them together, that yields the kinds of insights that it can be more difficult to get in other kinds of institutions. So I think it is a kind of an ideal model of education, and I'm very happy to be working with faculty here like Dr. Asbury on what we do.
So, and I think to provide my perspective, one of my favorite stories, it was my first year working at Southwestern when I was in the orchestra, the principal violist. So in our section, he was, I believe, a composition major, and he actually wrote a whole score to an old Georges Méliès silent film from the 19-teens. And at our spring concert, he actually got to conduct it, and we played it live with the silent movie behind us. So it was a really an awesome type of opportunity that, again, I think in a larger environment, or you just wouldn't be able to get. So that's definitely my favorite story. So as we kind of wrap things up here with the last few minutes, we often talk about Paideia moments of how we make connections. So maybe Grace, we'll start with you since you're double majoring in different things. But what's your favorite Paideia moment that you have had during your time at Southwestern?
The first one that I can think of is just the most recent one. I have them all the time. Last semester, I took a Foundations of Business class, which is required for my business major. And if you are interested in business, we have some incredible business professors. Professor Ross, Dr. Seehee, they're like new parents to me. I love them. But in that class, we talked a lot about marketing and how what we show to people visually affects how they're going to interpret it. And at the same time, I was taking Theory 2, which is specifically about form. And so in these two different classes, I'm analyzing how people perceive things by what they hear and by what they see. And so I was making connections between the two, and then ended up strengthening what I was learning in them because of the other, if that makes sense.
I guess I'll jump in here quickly to say that I'm thinking a lot about Paideia moments at the moment because I'm going to be teaching the Paideia seminar in the fall semester. Currently there are, I see 23 students signed up, which is kind of a big for that class, and who knows, there may be a second section that will spin off of this. But I'm very excited about it, and actually part of my inspiration came from some work that Dr. Smith did years ago. And so the larger theme for this, so I'm afraid I've gotten ahead of myself a little bit. So some students will pursue a degree path that also includes having something called Paideia with distinction. And so part of the way that happens is students will choose to have a series of interdisciplinary experiences that ultimately will culminate in a seminar. So essentially what's going to happen is that the students are going to mostly lead this class. But we're going to be focused on a particular theme, and we're going to try to make connections around that theme through these multiple disciplines. And so we are choosing a theme of consonance and dissonance. And I can riff back to Dr. Smith, because years ago, she was part of a cohort of faculty that wrote a script for an opera on this idea of dissonance and seeing it through different perspectives of both art and music, especially. But if you stop and think about the ways that dissonance can play out in multiple disciplines, you can easily think of it as maybe conflict and resolution, and expand out into so many different areas. So I know that I'm going to be having a Paideia moment per day, if not more, in the fall, and very excited about that.
Good. Well, thank you so much. Well, I think we are going to wrap things up now. I just wanted to make a brief comment. So I know we've talked a lot about art history and music. Just know that, of course, Southwestern, we do have a studio art program, an architecture and design minor, and a very well-developed theater program. While we didn't have someone from the theater department on this panel, we know that a lot of you may have that interest. If so, we'd be really, really happy to connect you with some folks in the theater department, both our professors and current students. So please go ahead and send us an email to admission@southwestern.edu, and we'd be happy to make that connection for you. So I'd like to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for joining us and giving their expertise, and I will hand it back over to Laura.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Dr. Asbury, Dr. Smith, and Grace. That was wonderful. You gave us a lot of information. We're going to have a brief intermission, and when we come back, we are going to have some alumni talk to us, and also current parents. So we look forward to seeing you in a few minutes. Stay tuned.